Travis Wayne Goodsill. Not running this morning. We've got a thick layer of snow falling, and it was a little too slick on the sidewalks in splotches. So, I'll get to tell you about my dream earlier. I'm sure you've all seen, or at least know of, Lord of the Rings. My precious, one ring to rule them all. That was what my dream was involved with, is that I was working on a project in a room. It wasn't this residence, it was another residence. I took off my ring while I was working on whatever project it was that I was working on, and then had walked out of my apartment and was involved in a situation where, what was the animal? It was some kind of a lizard, serpent of some kind. Yes, the serpent was supposed to be a serpent symbol, and I was told to, in the dream, I was told in my head that I should be careful. It is dangerous, and yet I didn't quite listen per se, but it recognized me, acknowledged me, and went on to do its own thing. I didn't confront it, which was interesting. But then I realized that I didn't have my ring. It wasn't on my hand. And I then went to shake down some people. Where's my ring? And I was given information of a guy who steals rings, and so I went down to hunt him down, and police were busting people around me as I was able to walk among them, through them, without them stopping me and interrogating me. And went up some stairs into one particular building, found the guy, shook him down for the ring. He refused, so I shook him down a little harder, and he was compelled to give up his stash, and ended up tossing him down the stairwell, where the police then nabbed him. And I then opened up some picture frame or something like that, where he had hidden a ring inside, and I took that and found that it wasn't my ring. It was somebody else's ring. But it was cool nonetheless. It fit my hand, and it had. I don't know if you remember back in high school in the 80s, in Southern California, we had a particular ring seller that sold to high schools for their class rings. I can't remember the name of them, but the inner thing was a jewel, but you could see behind it, for ours it was a cougar, and so you can see the cougar behind the jewel. That's what that's similar to what this ring was. You had the jewel and then behind it was a dragon, a serpent. I had obtained the ring of the dragon. Isn't that cool? So I went home kind of discouraged that I didn't have my ring. But when I got home, I saw that on a little table opposite my bed where I was working on the project, there was my ring. It was there the whole time. So I hadn't lost it, but in my quest for finding what I thought was my missing ring, I obtained the ring of the dragon. My dreams are awesome. So, yeah, 6 days left for the church lawyers to respond. And it appears that according to the way the law functions, they don't need to respond. They can force a hearing according to Rule 55. But it would require me to merely show my evidence to the judge in that hearing against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's interesting. Rule of Civil Procedure 55 is default also for the Utah courts. Huh. So, Rule 55, entering a default when a party against whom a judgment for affirmative relief is sought has failed to plead or otherwise defend, and that failure is shown by affidavit or otherwise. The clerk must enter the party's default. So that's what I'm going to have to do, is show an affidavit again, present it to the court on the 31st, 6 days from now, and the clerk has to enter the party's default for pleading or otherwise defending. And so here's how to enter a default judgment by the clerk. If the plaintiff's claim is for a sum certain, and it's not, so that doesn't count. So we have to go to the clerk of the court, number 2, B2. Because the church has an uncertain amount of money. We've only scratched the surface when we found out about Ensign Peak Associates with $100 billion from tithing that they've funneled to this other account or investment group. And so it's unclear as to the total asset value of the church still, but we know it's in the multi-hundreds of billions. So in all other cases, the party must apply, so I must apply to the court for a default judgment. A default judgment may be entered against minor. Okay, if the party against whom a default judgment is sought has appeared personally or by a representative, which they have lawyers, that party or its representative must be served with written notice of the application at least 7 days before the hearing. Oh, I have to serve them. So I have to do the waiver of service again for the hearing. So wait a minute. In all cases, the party must apply to the court for a default judgment. If the party has appeared personally, they haven't appeared at all, they're refusing to appear. The court may conduct hearings or make referrals, preserving any federal statutory right to a jury trial. When to enter or effectuate judgment, it needs to conduct an accounting, determine the amount of damages, and that's what this one's needing to do, is identify the request for relief, because they're refusing to comply. And so it would be needed to establish how much relief I'm supposed to receive, and establish the truth of any allegation by evidence, which I can do. So investigate any other material. Okay. And then they have setting aside a default judgment for a good cause, and there is no good cause under Rule 60B. Judgment against the United States, nope, this is against the entity. So apparently I must apply to the court for a default judgment. So I have to motion the court for a default judgment hearing. But this is the tricky part. If the party against whom default judgment is sought has appeared personally or by a representative, that party or its representative must be served, and that's not the case here. They refuse to reply. The question is, will the clerks understand what to do in this case, because this is not normal behavior for people and such. The church, in the case of Kay Birmingham, waited until the last day and filed for a dismissal. And the judge is still sitting on it. It's been well over a month now, going on 2 months. He's taken his time, and he's not willing to do anything, especially now with coronavirus going on. I think he's hoping coronavirus will save his church, which is wrong. You're not supposed to do that as a judge. Okay, so this is going to be tricky, unless I can put a certain sum that can be made by computation. I guess the certain sum is everything, but it's not an actual dollar amount. So the clerk's not going to want to do that against his own church, because I have to show the amount due. Although I could, because I have a collection agency, and they sent me an email advertisement yesterday. So yes, they're waiting for me. Yeah, because mine is everything. And so I think if I show on the affidavit everything that we know from the church of all their assets, that will be sufficient. Everything in all of their Ensign Peak and the 12 or 15 investment groups that were exposed by Fox News, which Kay did not put on there. So she's missing some places, whereas I can then go to her case, list all her businesses that she knew about the church, and then go and do the investments that Max Roth gave us, and Ensign Peak Associates as well. I might be able to do that. So I do, well, a certain sum would be everything, and it doesn't need to be by computation. On the plaintiff's request, so affidavit the amount due, must enter judgment for that amount and costs against the defendant. I could do that by one. Okay. Because I got to figure out how to do the affidavit for the church when I go in on Tuesday. So we can avoid a default judgment then, and go right to my claim for everything, and then list all of the agencies as the certain sum. That might work. And then we can avoid a default judgment. We don't get to go to court. I don't get to show my evidence as I've been showing you on my channel. But then my collection agency, I have to wait for the judge though, because the judge still has to give the order that, yeah, we're all said and done. So that's going to be the tricky part, is because the federal judges are protecting the church, and they are refusing to respond, as in Kay's case and in mine. So that's going to be the final dilemma, is that I will present on Tuesday my victory, and that I must receive the claim, and the clerk will enter it, but they will they demand it as a motion, and that means that the judge has to give the order for approval, when all it says here is that the clerk must it must be entered as a judgment. So that's the thing that's tricky, is because the Mormons in the federal court are demanding I put it as a motion that the judge must approve. And right here you can read, if the plaintiff's claim is for a sum certain, the clerk, on the plaintiff's request with an affidavit showing the amount due, must enter judgment for that amount and costs against a defendant who has been defaulted for not appearing and who is neither a minor or an incompetent person. So, yeah, this is it. They have to do this, and I will put this rule in there for the clerk, but it's not a motion. So I would cross out motion and put request for final judgment. Must request for entry of judgment for final judgment. We'll think about this. I've got 6 days. We will get that money, and I will get it to every one of you who are suffering, because our governments, our businesses, our religions have all failed us, are refusing to comply with our needs. You know, the doctors are saying we need to lock down the nation in order to control this virus, and the doctors aren't thinking that they're causing harm by firing us from our jobs and keeping us home and denying us money to go buy basic necessities, such as food. The doctors are pretending to be clueless on this part. You know, when you're stuck at home, you don't get to eat well, and that gets you more susceptible to getting sick, and you're not able to exercise, aerobic exercise, not weights, aerobic exercise to get your heart pumping. And as a result, again, you're more susceptible to getting sick. And they're just not thinking as doctors. They're thinking about the coronavirus and the coronavirus only. And as a result, they're neglecting the health and welfare of the people. And so the churches, our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we're in a crisis. We need access to the storehouses. That's what the storehouses were built for, was the Great Depression, to help Mormons, because that's the majority of the people back in the Great Depression, who were unemployed, to be able to still survive, because they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't, they had welfare, I guess, or unemployment, but the church bypassed that by providing the bishop's storehouse supplies. And so it doesn't make any sense why the church is abandoning us now, when we're experiencing a very similar and worse condition potentially as we keep on going week after week after week. And so they failed. They closed down. And Mormons are not getting this. I mean, I'm getting Mormons yelling at me online saying, hey, quit complaining about the church. What are you doing? And it's ridiculous. They just don't get it. They don't see it. The church is supposed to be responding during this time. And instead the church is saying, oh, we're closing. If any of you survive when all this is over and said and done with, then you can come back and pay tithing to us again. But temples are closed. Why are the temples closed? Because everybody's losing their job and not paying tithing. That's how they're doing this. And it's unbelievable. And so, this is the worst case scenario we could have ever imagined. But I'm doing the best I can to save the world alone. And I shouldn't have to do it alone. But that's the way it is. So I'm going to put the song I Stand Alone from the Scorpion King soundtrack. If you're unfamiliar with the Scorpion King, he's a symbol of Horus. And if you don't know about Horus, then you're not listening to my videos.